Welcome again. On this ninth Sunday after Pentecost, we are still in Matthew's Gospel and we are looking at the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000. Food and feeding. So today we turn from Jesus' parables, which we've been looking at over the past couple of weeks, to a miracle story where Jesus feeds a huge crowd of people, 5,000 men plus women and children, it tells us, and feeds them with just a few loaves and fish. We've reminded ourselves over the past couple of weeks that parables tell us something important about God, but also something important about us and how we're to live. And in the Gospels, the miracles have a similar purpose. The writer of John's Gospel calls them signs. They tell us something important about God and something important about us and how we're to live. Now, I don't know about you, but I love sharing food and drink with friends, or at least used to before COVID, which has kind of ground to a halt a lot of that wonderful eating out together. But love it, perhaps whether it's a sophisticated dinner party or just a simple family barbecue. Jesus' whole ministry engaged with food and people. He was always in trouble with the religious authorities for eating with the wrong people, for going to the pub and eating with sinners. But he engaged with real people, real food, real bread. Scripture's full of images about food. We read of salt, grain, wine, figs, fish, bread over and over. There are psalms about hunger and thirst, about harvests and feasting. There are stories about God feeding people with manna and quail, and feeding the prophet Elijah with bread and meat brought to him by birds. Isaiah's prophecy calls everyone who hungers and thirsts to come and eat wine and milk, which are freely available without cost at God's heavenly banquet. In this story today, after a whole day healing the sick, teaching this great crowd of people, the disciples are starting to get worried. They're far from home, it's getting dark, the people are getting restless and hungry. Jesus invites the disciples to be part of the solution. What are you going to do about it? He asks them. So they tentatively bring him all that they can find, just a basket with 5 loaves and 2 fish, barely enough for 2 people, let alone thousands. But the story tells us that Jesus blesses this little offering, and as the disciples distribute it far and wide among the crowd, there's more than enough to fill everyone, and there's food left over. Jesus says to us, as he said to the disciples, when we look at the world's problems, what are you going to do about it? Perhaps sometimes we get overwhelmed by the enormity of the world's problems. So many people are hungry in our world. So many people struggle to find fresh water, while for other parts in the West, people just discard food all the time and waste water. Perhaps climate change seems to be too big to deal with. Perhaps we look at all the huge numbers of people unemployed through COVID, or even the rising infection rate. We just feel overwhelmed. It all seems impossible and far too big to know what to do. Churches get really stuck in this. If only we had more people. If only we had more resources. If only we had more funds, then we could. But you never hear Jesus say that. Whatever is there is enough. Whatever is offered is enough, whether that's food or faith. And it tells us faith as small as a mustard seed is enough. Whenever Jesus is present, there's always enough. Just 5 loaves and 2 fishes is enough for a crowd. I have long had a dream of a local cafe where people are fed whether they can afford it or not, where it's nothing to do with cost, where good healthy food is there for whatever people can afford, where those with resources fund those without. Perhaps this is a loaves and fishes moment, because real actual food is full of the presence of God. God is inviting us, like the disciples, to be part of the miracle of feeding. Jesus accepts no excuses. Bring me what you have, he says. Bring me whatever gifts you have, whatever resources you have. And when the meagre resources are brought to him, he does what they've seen him do again and again. He blesses it, he breaks it, and he shares it. All we have to do is come to God in trust with all that we have. No matter how small it seems, no matter how insignificant we feel we are, and then we just trust God to fill in the gaps. All we have to do is to have the courage to be in on the action, passing out the baskets when they're blessed and watching for God's great miracle. Do we actually have the courage to do that? The Lord be with you.